finally chose rooms and unloaded our belongings before meeting up in the double room Haruhi had taken. Occupying a double room by herself definitely fell into the category of Haruhi-like behavior. In other words, her personality doesn't allow for any restraint or modesty. The three girls were sitting on the bed. I was parked on the dressing table, and Koizumi was calmly leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "I figured it out," Haruhi shouted all of a sudden, and I reflexively responded in the usual fashion. "Figured out what?" "The culprit." Haruhi's face, as she made her proclamation, seemed to be filled with some kind of mysterious conviction. I reluctantly voiced what the other three were thinking. "What culprit? Nothing's happened yet. We just got here. My gut tells me the culprit is the master of this place. His first victim will probably be Mikuru." Asahina was really scared. She trembled like a little rabbit hearing the flapping of a hawk's wings and clutched at the skirt of Nagato standing next to her. Nagato didn't say anything. She just silently stared like a fixed point in the air. "Like I said, what culprit?" I asked one more time. "Or should I say, what crime do you intend to blame Keiichi Tamaru for?" "How am I supposed to know that? You just had a look in his eyes like he was plotting something. My gut is usually right. I'm sure that we'll be involved in some kind of big surprise." I hope that she wasn't just talking about a simple birthday surprise party, or Haruhi wasn't expecting some cheap party with a lame catch. Just imagine Keiichi suddenly dropping the friendly smile and getting a crazy look in his eyes as he starts slashing guests with a kitchen knife. The old guy beating at the door just to use us as some sacrifices because he was possessed by an ancient spirit after assembling in an old dolmen deep in the forests of the island. That's ridiculous. I waved one hand in a horizontal motion as I shot myself down. There's no way that an acquaintance of Koizumi's would do something ridiculous like that. The agency can't be made up of a bunch of idiots. They should have investigated the site beforehand. Koizumi still has the usual harmless smile on his face. Arakawa the butler, Sonomori, and Yutaka Tamaru have absolutely nothing in common with the residents from horror stories. Besides, Haruhi is looking for a detective mystery, not a splatter film. If anything were to happen, it'd be a serial murder or two, right? Though I doubt it's going to happen so conveniently. The skies are clear and they haven't issued a high seas warning. This island hasn't become an isolated space. Besides, Haruhi wouldn't truly wish for someone to die. If Haruhi were that kind of person, I'd have run out of patience after dealing with her for so long. Haruhi, paying no heed to my worries, spoke up in an innocent-sounding voice. "Let's start by taking a swim. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that people come to the beach with the sole purpose of swimming. Let's see how far we can swim. We can have a contest to see who gets carried away by the waves first." "Sure, but you better have a search and rescue team standing by." "Still, we just got here and we're already on the move? Hasn't she even considered taking a short break after the long voyage?" Of course, it was possible that Haruhi wasn't tired, but she could at least occasionally refrain from using herself as a standard for everybody else. "What are you talking about? You can take an offering to the Temple of Apollo, but that isn't going to stop the sun. We have to move before the sun sets, 'cause time's a-wasting." Haruhi wrapped her arms around Asahina and Nagato's necks. Went Asahina. She blinked, while was the silent response from Nagato. "Swimsuits, swimsuits. Get changed and meet up in the lobby." "I chose the swimsuits these girls will be wearing. Gion, you're getting excited, aren't you?" Haruhi bared her white teeth with a creepy smirk and a look that she knew absolutely what I was thinking. "You're absolutely right." I puffed my chest up in defiance. That was my primary objective for this trip. I won't let anyone rain on my parade. Koizumi, the private beach is reserved for us, right? "Yes, that's right. Our only company will be a few seashells washed up on the shore. It's an unexplored beach, but the tide comes in so quickly you shouldn't get too far away from the coast, assuming you were serious about having a contest." As if it was just a joke. Someone like Mikuru would end up as fish food after getting swept away by Kuroshio current in no time. "Okay, everybody, don't get all excited and swim too far out. Stay where I can see you." Should Haruhi be acting as the guardian here when she's the most excited one? Maybe I should suck it up and play that role. In any case, I'll take care not to let Asahina out of my sight for longer than 2 seconds. Over there, Kyon! Haruhi pointed her finger at the tip of my nose. Get that creepy smile off your face. You look better with your mouth half open in a grimace. I won't be letting you have the camera. The high-flying and audacious Haruhi Express smiled. Okay, let's go. And so, here we are. Here was a coastal beach of sand. The intense sunlight was definitely what you'd expect of summer. The advancing waves washed over the sand as the clouds, white clouds puffy like cotton candy, slowly floated over a canvas of deep blue. A sharp sea breeze rustled our hair and slowly beckoned us to the water. The words, "Private beach," have a nice ring. But the truth was, there wasn't any need to book a reservation for this beach because it was on an island so far removed from civilization that nobody would ever bother coming here to swim, with the exception of foreign tourists who'd been fooled by some travel magazine. Needless to say, there wasn't any sign of human life around besides the 5 of us. There weren't even any birds flying around, which meant that the only witnesses lucky enough to see Haruhi and the other girls in their swimsuits were the barnacles attached to the rocks, if you don't count Koizumi and me. I had spread a blanket under the beach umbrella and squinted at Asahina, who looked all embarrassed, when Haruhi ran up to block my view. Mikuru, swimming at the beach is a rule of this world. Come on, let's go. It's unhealthy to stay out of the sunlight. Wait, but my skin gets sunburned really easily. Haruhi paid no heed to Asahina's cowering as she led the pale upperclassmen to the edge of the water and dove in. It's salty. Asahina was surprised by the obvious as she splashed in the water. As for Nagato, she is kneeling on the blanket with her back straight, also in a swimsuit, as she read a paperback in silence. Each person has a different method of having fun. Koizumi stopped blowing at the beach ball to smile at me. People should spend their leisure time doing activities they enjoy, or else that would defeat the purpose of going on a vacation. Shouldn't we attempt to relax and savor this 4-day, 3-night trip? Isn't Haruhi the only one enjoying herself? I doubt that Asahina is feeling too relaxed when Haruhi's toying with her. Hey! Kyon! Koizumi! You guys get over here too! We stood in response to Haruhi's siren-like shouting. Truth be told, I didn't go reluctantly. Haruhi aside, my heart's desire was to be near Asahina. Koizumi passed a blown-up beach ball to me, and I began walking across the hot sand. Upon returning to the villa, feeling moderately fatigued, we took quick showers before returning to our rooms for a brief rest, after which time the sky was filled with stars and Mori was leading us to the dining hall. It was dinner time. Dinner that night was an extravagant affair. I doubt Asahina had particularly wanted to eat seafood, but there was a plateful in front of each of us, enough to make a person destined to live in poverty like me sit up straight. And we're getting free room and board? Is this really okay? Absolutely, Keiichi Tamaru assured us with a smile on his face. Just think of it as a way of showing my appreciation for coming all the way out here. After all, I was bored. Well, I don't mean I would have invited anyone available, but Itsuki's friends are more than welcome here. Keiichi was now dressed formally, unlike when he came out to greet us. He wore a dark suit with a necktie and a Windsor knot. The food being served was a mix of Japanese and European cuisine, with a menu including carpaccio, menuire, and some kind of steamed dish along with others. Although Keiichi was the only one eating with a knife and fork, the rest of us have been using chopsticks the whole time. The food is absolutely delicious. Who made this? Haruhi asked as she displayed an appetite worthy of consideration for an eating contest. The butler, Arakawa, also serves as a chef. Impressive, isn't it? Said Keiichi. I'd love to offer my appreciation. Please call him over later. Haruhi was putting on airs of a person at a fancy restaurant. Asahina's eyes widened every time she took a bite. Nagato, who didn't seem like a big eater, was keeping up with a surprising pace. Koizumi was cheerfully chatting with Yutaka and the others. Would you like something to drink? Mori, who served as our waitress in her maid outfit, held out a long and narrow bottle as she smiled at me. Looks like some kind of wine. Can't say that I approve of offering alcohol to minors, but I decided to try a glass. I'd never had wine before, but humans are supposed to be a little adventurous. Besides, I feel bad if I turn down Mori while being faced with that charming smile. Ah, what are you drinking by yourself over there, Kyon? I'll have some of that too. Per Haruhi's request, a glass of wine was passed to everyone. Somehow, I have a feeling that this is when the nightmare began. That day, I discovered that Asahina had absolutely zero tolerance for alcohol. Nagato was like a bottomless pit, and Haruhi was a hopeless drunk. My own memories are rather hazy since I got cocky and drank a bit too much, but I recall Haruhi drinking from the bottle as she slapped Keiichi's head. Man, you're the best. I'll leave Mikuru here as thanks for inviting us. Do some serious maid training. This girl really needs help. I vaguely remember Haruhi shouting something along those lines. The real maid, Sonomori, had lined up the wine bottles on the table like bowling pins and presented us with expertly sliced apples for dessert. Asahina, the fake maid, who was only on duty in the clubroom, collapsed on the table, her face completely red. Nagato continued emptying the alcoholic beverages Mori brought over. I have no idea how her body processed alcohol, but her complexion hasn't changed a bit as she emptied bottle after bottle like a whale drinking seawater. Yutaka looked at her with great interest. Are you sure you're fine? The sight of him talking to Nagato in a concerned voice tugged at a corner of my memory. That night, I completely passed out and was able to reach my bed only with Koizumi's help. Koizumi told me afterward with a mocking smile on his face. He also mentioned that I, along with Haruhi, had engaged in some sort of disgraceful behavior, which I had no recollection of any such thing, so I'll just pretend I never heard him tell me that. We'll just say it was one of Koizumi's typical jokes. Because what happened the next day pushed all that stuff to the corner of our minds. On the morning of the second day, a storm showed up out of the blue. A horizontal rain pounded on the walls, a strong gust howled ominously. The trees around the villa shook as though they were possessed by ghosts. Rotten luck. A hurricane had to show up now of all times, Haruhi muttered as she looked out the window. We were in Haruhi's room. We had gathered to hold a meeting to discuss what we would do today. We had already eaten breakfast. Keiichi had been absent from the table that morning. Apparently he had a hard time getting up in the morning, and it was all but impossible for him to get out of bed before noon, according to Arakawa's explanation. Haruhi turned to us. But you know, now we're really on a remote island in the middle of a storm. A once-in-a-lifetime situation. Maybe something actually will happen. Asahina flinched as her eyes darted around. Koizumi and Nagato looked as though this was business as usual. The waves had been perfectly calm yesterday, yet now we had a high wave warning. Definitely beyond acceptable conditions going out on a boat. Still, if it's still this bad in 2 days, we'll have been unwillingly trapped on this island because of Haruhi's will. A close circle. It couldn't be. Koizumi smiled in an attempt to reassure us. It appears to be a fast-moving hurricane, so conditions should improve over the next 2 days. It'll suddenly disappear by the way it suddenly showed up. That's what the weather forecast says, but there wasn't any information about a hurricane coming yesterday. Whose head did this storm pop out of? It was a coincidence, Koizumi said calmly. An ordinary natural phenomenon. One of the signs of summer. We get at least one large-scale hurricane every year. I was planning on exploring the island, but we'll have to cancel that, Haruhi said in a bitter voice. Can't do anything about that. Let's find something we can do indoors. I guess that Haruhi had completely forgotten the purpose of this trip, since her focus had shifted to having fun. I appreciate the change, since I didn't want to come over to the other side of the island to find a carcass of some huge organism washed up against the cliff. Koizumi offered her his opinion. I believe there is a game room. I asked Keiichi to let us use it. Would you prefer mahjong or billiards? I'm sure they could also prepare a ping-pong table if we asked. Haruhi approved. Then we'll have a ping-pong tournament, a round-robin tournament to determine the first SOS Brigade ping-pong champion. The loser has to buy juice for everyone on the ferry ride back. You're not allowed to hold yourself back. The game room was in the basement. It was a spacious hall with mahjong and billiard tables, in addition to a roulette wheel and a baccarat table. Were Koizumi's relatives running a casino on the side? This seemed to be a prime spot for gambling. Who knows, Koizumi said with an innocent smile on his face. He was sliding up a folded ping-pong table over from the wall. Incidentally, Haruhi won the ping-pong tournament after a fiercely contested match with me. We then moved on to a mahjong tournament. However, Koizumi was the only SOS Brigade member who knew the rules, so it turned into a game of learn as we go. The Tamadu brothers joined in halfway through, which made the mahjong session a little more animated. Haruhi distorted the rules to make up her own winning hands that didn't make any sense, like 2 color 1 void, or pseudo outside hand, or permanently 2 away, and declared victory after victory. It was amusing, so we let her have fun. Plus, we weren't paying for money. Run! Probably around 10,000 points. Suzumiya, that's capped at 8,000. I surreptitiously released a sigh of relief. I should have adopted a more optimistic mindset. It would be best to enjoy this trip in a normal fashion. At any rate, there wouldn't be any fishy sea monsters popping out of the ocean, or any aboriginals storming out of the forest. After all, we were on a remote island in the middle of the ocean. Nothing weird would be able to come from the outside. With that in mind, I decided to relax. Keiichi Tamadu and Yutaka, along with the Arakawa Mori servant combo, appeared quite normal for acquaintances of Koizumi. We would need a few more characters before anything strange could happen. That's what I wanted to believe. But as they say, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. I don't know exactly which fat lady is doing the singing, or where she's planning on exactly doing her singing. But once I found out where she is, I'd love to put her out of commission for a whole year. The trouble came on the morning of the 3rd day. We spent the 2nd day having fun and gorging ourselves, and the weather got even worse that night as we held a banquet so similar to the previous night it was like a replay. On the 3rd day, I woke up with a killer headache. If Koizumi hadn't woken us up, Haruhi, Asahina, and I probably would have kept on sleeping. I opened the curtains. The storm was still pouring down on us the morning of the 3rd day. I wonder if we'll be able to go home tomorrow. I splashed cold water in my face to clear my head until I could walk in a straight line and carefully walk downstairs, making sure I didn't trip. The other members were already sitting at the table in the dining hall. Haruhi and Asahina looked about as bad as I did, while Nagato and Koizumi looked the same as always. The brothers, Keiichi Tamadu and Yutaka, weren't here yet. They might have reached their limit after consecutive hangovers. I recalled Haruhi turning the bottle upside down over the glasses. Haruhi was arrogant enough under normal circumstances, but alcohol only served to power her up to unrivaled levels of recklessness, which only made my head hurt more. I resolved to never drink alcohol again with such reckless abandon. I'm going to stop drinking wine. It appeared that Haruhi had learned her lesson yesterday, and she made her declaration with a grimace on her face. For some reason, I have no memory of what happened after dinner. Isn't that an incredible waste? It's like I lost that time. Yeah, I'm never gonna get drunk again. We're going alcohol-free tonight. Normally, high school students shouldn't be drinking anyway, so I suppose I should praise Haruhi for a relatively decent proposal. But yeah, Asahina in her drunken days was pretty damn sexy, so I shouldn't say that we should get rid of alcohol altogether. Let's do that then. Koizumi immediately agreed with her like a sycophant as Mori came in with a cart that had her breakfast. Could you refrain from serving alcohol tonight? Soft drinks only, please. Understood. Mori bowed respectfully as she set plates of bacon and eggs on the table. The Tamadu brothers had yet to show up in the dining hall by the time we had finished eating. We knew that Keiichi had an extremely hard time getting up in the morning, but Yutaka's absence was somewhat odd. Everyone? Arakawa and Mori appeared before us. I could sense that Arakawa's composed face was slightly disturbed. I had a really bad feeling. What is it? Koizumi asked him. Is something wrong? Yes, said Arakawa. Something that could be considered a problem may have happened. A short while ago, Mori went to check Master Yutaka's room. Mori nodded slowly before she picked up where the butler had left off. The room was unlocked, so I went inside, but Master Yutaka was nowhere to be found. She spoke in a voice that sounded like bells ringing. Mori stared at the tablecloth as she spoke. The room was completely empty. There were no signs that the bed had been slept in. And then I tried to reach the master over the intercom. However, there was no response. Arakawa's words made Haruhi drop the glass of orange juice in her hand. What's that? So Yutaka is missing and Keiichi isn't responding? To be frank, that would be correct, said Arakawa. You can't get into Keiichi's room. Is there an extra key? I hold the spare keys for the other rooms, but the master's room is an exception. The master holds the only spare key. It's a precaution since there are documents concerning his work inside. The bad feeling gnawing at my gut had expanded into a dark cloud covering a third of my spirit. The master of the manor who wouldn't wake up, the younger brother who had disappeared. Arakawa bowed ever so slightly. I intend to proceed to the master's room now. If possible, I'd like everyone to accompany me. I feel a sort of unrest, so I hope my worries are for naught. Haruhi shot me a quick look. Is she trying to tell me something? We should go take a look. Koizumi immediately stood up. He could be ill or in some other condition which was preventing him from getting up. It may be necessary to break the door down. Haruhi hopped out of her seat. Kyon, let's go. I've got a bad feeling about this. Come on, Yuki and Mikuru too. The look on Haruhi's face was extraordinarily serious. I'll make this quick. We knocked on the door to Keiichi's bedroom on the 3rd floor, but there wasn't any response. Koizumi turned the knob, but the solid oak door wouldn't open and stood like a wall that impeded our progress. We checked Yutaka Tamaru's room on the way there, but just as Mori said, the bedsheets were untouched, making it highly unlikely that anybody spent the night in that room. Where'd he gone? Were he and Keiichi both cooped up in Keiichi's room? If the door is locked from the inside, that must mean there is someone in the room. Koizumi stroked his chin as he put on a thinking face before speaking in an unusually terse voice. We have no choice. We must break down the door. Time could become a critical factor depending on the situation. And so we bunched together and repeatedly slammed into the door. We being Koizumi, Arakawa, and myself. Nagato could probably pick the lock or something, but we couldn't let her use her funky magic in front of all these people. The 3 female members of the SOS Brigade and Mori the maid watched from the side as we 3 males slammed into the door again and again. My shoulder blade was on the verge of screaming in pain when the door finally sprang open. The momentum carried Koizumi, Arakawa, and me into the room where we fell down, and then... Yes, now we have returned to the opening scene. Finally returned to the present, back to telling the story in real time. And once that flashback had concluded, I lifted myself off the floor. I looked away from Keiichi, who lay with a knife stuck in him, to scrutinize the door with the busted lock. I marveled at the sturdiness of the newly built mansion. Even the doors were shiny, or... yeah, I'm trying to escape reality here. Arakawa kneeled next to his master's body and placed his fingertips against Keiichi's neck. He then looked up at us. He has passed on, he said in a composed voice, perhaps because he was a professional. Asahina's legs had given out and she was sitting in the hallway. I suppose it was only natural. I felt like doing the same. Nagato's expressionless face was feeling like a real blessing right about now. It appears that we're in quite a predicament. Koizumi circled around Keiichi to the side opposite Arakawa. Koizumi crouched down, carefully reached out, and gingerly touched the jacket of Keiichi's suit. His white shirt was stained by a dark red liquid blot of irregular shape. Oh? Koizumi said in a dubious voice. I looked over. There was a notepad in Keiichi's shirt pocket. The knife had gone through the suit and pierced the notepad before entering his body. The person who committed this act of violence must have been fairly strong. It doesn't appear that the ladies here would have been capable of such an act, though I suppose Haruhi and her ridiculous strength could have pulled it off. Koizumi spoke in a pensive voice. Our first priority is to preserve the scene of the crime. For now, let's leave the room. Mikuru, are you okay? It wasn't that surprising for Haruhi to sound concerned, since Asahina had apparently fainted. She was sitting on the floor with her eyes closed and leaning against Nagato's thin legs. Yuki, we'll carry Mikuru to my room. You take that arm. I suppose that Haruhi, talking like a person with common sense, could be considered a sign of how upset she was. Nagato and Haruhi each grabbed one of Asahina's arms and dragged her off toward the stairs. Once I was sure they were gone, I turned to survey my surroundings. Arakawa's hands were clasped in a prayer over his master, and he had a grieved expression on his face. Mori turned still to the side, looking down in sorrow, and Isaka Tamaru was still nowhere to be found. It was storming outside. Well then, Koizumi turned to me with a thin smile back on his face. Have you noticed? The situation is exactly what you would call a closed circle. I already knew that. And at first glance, it would appear that we have a murder on our hands, since this doesn't look like a suicide. Furthermore, it happened in a sealed room. I turned to look at the locked windows. How could the culprit commit the crime in this inaccessible room and make his escape? As a culprit. Indeed, Koizumi concurred. We'll need to ask Yutaka about this matter. Koizumi instructed Arakawa to call the police, but then he turned back to me. Please go on ahead to Suzumiya's room. I'll be there shortly. This seemed like a good idea. There wasn't anything else I could do here. I knocked on the door. Who is it? It's me. The door opened a crack and Haruhi peered out. She invited me in with a strained look on her face. Where's Koizumi? He should be here soon. Asahina was sleeping on one of the two beds. You didn't happen to have a prince passing by who would want to kiss that sleeping face, but she had a pained expression and was still unconscious, so I couldn't do anything about it. Nagata was sitting in a chair next to her like someone keeping watch over her tomb. Keep it up. Don't leave Asahina's side. Say, what do you think? Haruhi's question appeared to be directed at me. What do you mean? Keiichi, is this a murder case? If one views one's current situation from an objective standpoint, one should be able to derive the answer. I gave it a try. We broke down the locked door to find the master of the manor lying completely still on the floor, with the handle of a knife sticking out of his chest. A murder in a sealed room on a remote island in the middle of the storm. Too perfect. Looks like it. After a few seconds of time lag, Haruhi sighed in response to my answer. Haruhi lifted one hand to her forehead as she plopped down on her bed. Unbelievable. I never expected something like this to happen. Her murmured words were also hard to believe. Weren't you talking about how badly you wanted something to happen? That's 'cause I wasn't expecting something to actually happen. Haruhi grimaced before quickly changing her expression. She appeared to be worrying about what to do in her own way. I was relieved that she wasn't celebrating, since I wouldn't want to end up playing the role of the second victim. I looked at the upperclassman sleeping with the face of an angel. How's Asahina doing? She should be fine. She just fainted. I have to admire her meek reaction. It's just like Mikuru to faint. Though, at least she didn't go into hysterics. Haruhi's mind appeared to be elsewhere as she spoke. A murder in a sealed room on a remote island during a storm. What were the chances of such a thing happening during our trip? However, we were the SOS Brigade, not an occult society or a mystery novel association. Though, according to Haruhi, the core principle of the SOS Brigade was to search for the supernatural. Our present circumstances somewhat match that principle, though I have to say that it's a totally different story once you're actually experiencing something happening. Did this happen because Haruhi desired so? This isn't good. Haruhi got up from the bed and began pacing around the room. She reminded me of a mischievous boy after an April Fool's prank gone wrong. Like a person joking around about something bad happening, and then it actually happened. I didn't feel too good myself. Well, what to do? I would have loved to go to sleep next to Asahina, but it wouldn't be very productive to escape reality. We needed to come up with a way to deal with this. I wonder what Koizumi planned on doing. Yeah, I can't just sit around waiting, Haruhi said in a firm voice as she stood next to me. I suppose I should have expected this. Haruhi had a serious expression on her face as she shot me a challenging look. I need to check something. Hyon, will you come with me? I don't want to leave Asahina here like this. Yuki's with her, so she'll be fine. Yuki, you lock the door and don't open it for anyone. Got it? Nagato coolly stared at Haruhi. Yes. She responded in a monotone voice. Her lifeless eyes met mine for a brief instant. She nodded ever so slightly at an angle where only I would notice. I think. I doubted that anything dangerous would happen to Haruhi and me. If something were to happen to worsen the situation, Nagito wouldn't be sitting there silently. As proof, I recalled the memory of when we went to the Computer Society President's room a short while back. "Let's go, Kyon." Haruhi grabbed my wrist before stepping out of the room and into the hallway. "So, where are we going?" "Keiichi's room. I didn't have time to look around earlier, so I want to check the scene again." I recalled Keiichi lying on the floor with a knife in his chest and the dried blood sticking to his white shirt, and hesitated for a moment. "That's not something you want to stare too closely at." Haruhi continued to talk as she walked. "And we need to find out where Yutaka went. He may still be in the building. Besides," we caused quite a commotion. "If Yutaka had nothing to do with the murder, it'd be quite odd for him not to show himself. There could be two possible reasons for his absence." I spoke up as Haruhi dragged me up the stairs. "Either Yutaka was the culprit and already escaped the villa, or Yutaka was also a victim, right?" "Yep, but things could get ugly if Yutaka isn't the culprit." "I'd say they're already ugly enough regardless of who the culprit is." Haruhi gave me a sideways glance. "Hey, Kyon, excluding the Tamari brothers, the only people in this manner would be Arakawa, Mori, and the five of us. That would mean the culprit is one of those people. I don't want to suspect my own brigade members or turn them over to the police." She sounded awfully solemn. "I see. She's worried that one of us was the killer. I hadn't even considered that possibility. Asahina was out of the question, and Nagito would have done a better job. As for Koizumi, now that I think about it, Koizumi had been the closest one to Tamadu. He'd mentioned being a relative. That would make him much more relevant than complete strangers like the rest of us. No, I poked myself in the head. Koizumi wasn't an idiot. He wouldn't purposely commit such borderline acts in this situation. I doubted that he would be crazy enough to commit a murder just because we happen to be in a close circle. Haruhi's the only crazy person we need around here.